Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're looking at the weekly agricultural updates for August 23rd, 2026. Okay, let's dive right into this. We are taking a massive amount of dense agricultural data today and translating it into a clear, systems-level view of India's current landscape. If you follow this space, you already know there is a lot of noise out there right now. Changing weather patterns, super volatile market signals, shifting policies. Our goal today is to cut straight through that noise. We're going to connect the dots between what's happening up in the sky, what's actually growing down in the soil, and how all of that ultimately impacts the broader economy and, of course, the farmer on the ground.
Here is the roadmap for today's explainer, taking us from the macro down to the micro. 1. Weather shocks and headlines. 2. Crop risks and regions. 3. Inputs, markets, and policies. 4. The farmer-level impact. And 5. Our strategic outlook and action. Let's get to it.
All right, starting off with Section 1, Weather Shocks and Headlines.
So looking at the agroclimatic picture right now, there's literally one overarching threat driving almost every single trend in Indian agriculture, an incredibly uneven southwest monsoon. We had a super dry June. We're talking a national rainfall deficit of over 40%, followed by a July that kind of recovered but only in certain localized spots. And the real jaw-dropper? Look at southern India's monitored reservoirs. They're sitting at just 33.7% capacity. Guys, to put that into perspective, at this exact time last year, those same reservoirs were over 75% full. That is a dramatic, dangerous drop. This establishes some immense stakes right out of the gate for states like Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Karnataka, and Tamil Nadu, especially as their Kharif crops enter highly moisture-sensitive stages.
And you know, this isn't just an agronomic headache anymore. It is dominating macroeconomic headlines. Take a look at this warning from the Reserve Bank of India. They explicitly state that a deficient and uneven monsoon, layered on top of geopolitically driven input cost pressures, poses a direct risk to rural demand and food inflation. When the central bank is ringing the alarm bells over weather volatility, you know broader economic stability is on the line. What's happening in the fields this week? Yeah, we're definitely going to feel that at the grocery store next month.
Moving right along to Section 2, Crop Risks and Regions.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how these weather shocks are basically dictating what's successfully growing and what is really struggling across different states. If we look at the crop intelligence and actual acreage data, there's a crazy disparity in sown progress. Sugarcane is absolutely thriving, sitting at roughly 108% of its normal area. Oilseeds hanging tough at 90%. But rice, a fundamental dietary staple, is lagging behind at just 84%. So what's happening? Commercial crops with assured procurement and pricing structures are pushing ahead, while rain-fed staples and regional hotspots are just taking a direct hit from that delayed June monsoon.
But here's the thing, acreage only tells half the story, right? The other half is the massive yield risk on the crops that actually did get planted. Because it's not just a lack of rain, it's unprecedented heat. July nighttime temperatures were literally the second highest they've been since 1901. Think about that for a second. Why does nighttime heat even matter? Well, crops need to cool down at night to respire properly. When they can't, this intense heat stress hits them right during those crucial grain filling and pod development stages. So actually, even if a farmer successfully planted during that brief July rainfall recovery, this thermal shock threatens to severely hollow out their actual harvest.
Okay, let's pivot to Section 3, Inputs, Markets, and Policies.
Shifting our focus over to input economics, those near-normal overall sowing numbers you might see flashing in the headlines, they're actually masking some pretty severe hidden risks. For one, we're seeing immense pressure on fertilizer subsidies. Geopolitical conflicts in places like West Asia are just driving up global prices. And sure, the government is shielding farmers for now, but that subsidy bill is at risk of massively overshooting budget projections. Add to that the heavy reliance on costly diesel and electricity. Farmers are basically forced to run their groundwater pumps in overdrive just to compensate for the lack of rain in depleted canals. The economics of farming right now are incredibly tight.
So how are farmers actually navigating these input costs? Well, we have to look at the market and policy signals. The government has rolled out some really aggressive minimum support price, or MSP, hikes for the 2026-27 season. Just look at these jumps. Sunflower seed is up by 622 rupees per quintal, and cotton is up 557 rupees. These aren't just subtle little nudges. These are powerful behavioral drivers. The government is actively encouraging farmers to switch their crops toward oilseeds and cotton, where returns are better guaranteed, and honestly, water reliance can be a lot more predictably managed compared to traditional staples.
And no surprise, we're already seeing real-world market reactions to all this supply anxiety.
Take Lassalgan, India's benchmark wholesale market for onions. Prices there spiked over 30% in a matter of days, hitting roughly 3,700 to 3,800 rupees per quintal. This kind of extreme volatility is exactly the food inflation scenario the RBI was warning us about earlier. In fact, it's already prompted the government to plan rapid buffer stock releases just to try and calm the market before it totally wrecks the consumer's wallet.
All right, so we've looked at the sky, we've talked macroeconomics, and we've analyzed the policy signals. But let's ground this. What does all of this sweeping macro turbulence actually mean for the individual farmer standing out in their field today? That brings us to Section 4, the farmer-level impact.
And this brilliantly illustrates the real human impact. The truth is, the current climate and market conditions aren't hitting everyone equally. Our system's interpretation reveals a massive economic and agronomic divide opening up across the sector. On one side, you've got irrigated large farmers. Think your typical Punjab and Haryana command areas. They have buffers against these shocks. Sure, they're facing higher energy costs, but they can absorb them, and they can adjust their crop portfolios to chase those high MSPs we just talked about. But on the flip side, you have rain-fed smallholders in the eastern and southern uplands. They are severely vulnerable to rainfall variability, they're getting crushed by high pump costs for supplemental irrigation, and they're operating on razor-thin financial margins. For them, a poor late-season dry spell isn't just an inconvenience, it's a full-blown economic crisis.
Finally, Section 5, Strategic Outlook and Action.
So what do we actually do with all this information? Let's look at the strategic outlook for the next 4 to 8 weeks. Here are the actionable insights you really need to take away from this explainer to navigate these interconnected risks. If you're an agronomist or a farmer, proactive risk management is absolutely crucial right now. First, target your moisture conservation specifically at those pod filling and grain filling stages. That's literally where yields are won or lost today. Second, where you can, use those market signals to diversify into high MSOP oilseeds to hedge your risk. Third, optimize your fertilizer. Avoid the overuse of subsidized urea and stick to the recommended doses to manage costs. Fourth, for states with massive reservoir deficits, you've got to start preparing your early rabi or winter crop plans now, focusing on less water-intensive crops. And finally, for the startups and policymakers listening, aggressively scale low-cost agri-tech diagnostics for those vulnerable rain-fed areas. We need precision tools in the hands of smallholders immediately.
Which leaves us with this final provocative thought. Look, 2026 is proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that erratic monsoons, intense heat stress, and global supply chain disruptions, they aren't anomalies anymore. They are structural realities. We just can't afford to react season by season anymore. So the big question we have to ask ourselves, and the ultimate challenge for innovators and policymakers alike, is this. As climate variability becomes a structural reality, how will our agricultural systems evolve from seasonal panic and reaction to permanent structural resilience? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep that question in the back of your mind as we watch the rest of the season unfold.